Hi there. I was voted most likely to get killed in my senior yearbook. If you're thinking, wow, that's a pretty dark joke, yes, it is, but there's a little bit of truth in it too. You see, I used to work at a campground that I think some of you know pretty well. It was a decent job. Kate always kept the minors in her employment on the safe jobs. I worked in the camp store as a cashier, and the worst I had to deal with was money that had been pulled out of someone's bra. Please don't do that. Carry a wallet, I'm begging you. No one wants to touch your boob sweat. Around here, our lives are pretty much lined up for us before we get out of high school. Not many people leave, so it's expected that you have yourself figured out before you graduate. For me, it looked pretty likely that I'd just keep working at the campground. I was reliable, so Kate kept hiring me year after year as seasonal help. And generally, when you've spent all of high school working at the campground, you've got a good shot at getting a permanent spot when they open up. Hence the yearbook entry. It's not that I'm bad at following rules or anything. It's just that I don't like dealing with the inhuman, and I'm not very good at handling stressful situations. I cry easily. I'm indecisive. Sometimes I feel like I was everything Kate wasn't. It's weird, what happened. I don't know whether I should refer to her in past tense or not, but this isn't about Kate. To be honest, I didn't even know her that well. She was my boss, sure, but she wasn't really close to anyone. I can't really tell you anything you don't already know. I actually learned a lot about her when I read over all those posts she made. Yeah, I found them, obviously. No one else around town has, though, because the rumors would be everywhere if someone had. And I'm not about to say anything. It's nice, though, to have a group of people that already know all about the campground. I feel like I can come here and write this out and have people that understand my situation. Much like Kate, my future was laid out in large part by my family. Unlike Kate, it wasn't a future I wanted. I'm the second oldest in a family of 6. My mom runs the antique store. It's actually just a junk store. But a lot of the campers that venture into town can't tell the difference between a vintage, all antique, and badly maintained. I don't think I grew up poor, but I certainly wouldn't call my family financially stable. Same situation as most of the folks around here. I didn't see much of my dad growing up. He was usually out west working in the fields. He sent money home regularly, until one day he didn't. We never found out what happened to him. Everyone around town said that he'd gotten tired of mom cheating on him and split. But I don't think the affair was enough to make him abandon his children as well. I think something got him, something out in the fields. And the people that hired him, well, they've got their own secrets they want to keep, much like Kate did. After he vanished, Mom grew very concerned about making sure all her children would turn out okay. But it was like she could only care about one of us at a time. I grew up without much of her attention, and honestly, I think I wouldn't have turned out that well if it wasn't for the campground. The staff looked out for the high schoolers. Ed gave me my first beer when I was 15. Brian helped get my car towed out of the ditch one winter when I slid off the road. They were like a second family. Then, last year, my older sister got married, and all of a sudden, Mom cared very deeply about what would happen to me after I graduated. Fortunately for her, there was a script already written. I was dating someone. His dad ran an auto repair shop, and he was all set to work there and probably inherited after he got done with school. It's a pretty stable business, and in my mom's mind, that would set me up for life. All I had to do was marry him, and that'd be one less child she had to worry about. He wouldn't go out west and get killed by whatever else is out there, lurking in the branches of the orchards or in the shadows of the barns. And I just accepted this. I graduated in the spring and worked at the campground for the summer, and as fall approached, my older sister started talking about weddings and whether my boyfriend would propose or not. Like that was the only future I had. When I look back, I wonder why I sent out those college applications. No one had talked to me about college. Not my teachers, not my parents, no one. College was something the well-off families like Kate's did, and there aren't many of those. I just went to the library one day, printed out some applications, wrote an essay, and sent them in. It felt like I was someone else at that moment, acting on a crazy whim. I guess maybe I knew, even if I wasn't ready to admit it to myself. I didn't love my boyfriend. I was just going through the motions. Dating him was something I felt was expected of me. He wasn't even all that nice. Now him, I can write about in the past tense. A week ago, I got a response from one of those colleges. It's an obscure state college, but they're giving me an academic scholarship that'll cover tuition, housing, and even a stipend for food. Since I applied too late for the fall semester, I'll be able to start after winter break. It was like my world was turned upside down when I opened that letter. I panicked. I couldn't let anyone in my family see it. They'd all bought into the fantasy that my life would turn out just like my sister's, that I'd marry my high school sweetheart and everything would be perfect, like a fairy tale. And here I was, holding the key to my own prison cell, and I couldn't let them know that I had it. With 4 siblings left in the house, I didn't exactly have a lot of privacy, especially during the Christmas season. So I left, took the car, and went to the only place I felt comfortable, the campground. Despite what the yearbook says, I felt safer there than I did in my own home. I took the letter with me so I could read it over and over in the solitude of the deep woods where no one could bother me. That was the plan, at least. Then, everyone's favorite thirst trap showed up, just sauntered up the path and stopped in front of where I sat on a boulder. I gotta say, I appreciate that Kate's version of him was hot. "Would you like a drink?" Bo asked, holding out the skull cup. I stared blankly at him for a moment. This wasn't my first time seeing him after the rules changed. He could have offered it to me at any time, so why now? "You're at a crossroad," he said in answer to my unspoken question. "It's time to finally decide." Oh sure, we've all talked about it, how we would answer Bo when he asked. And I just never decided because he doesn't ask the locals, so what did it matter? But here he was, offering. I can't, I stammered. "Can't drink? Or something else?" His gaze slid down to the letter. I clutched it close to my chest and pressed my lips firmly together. He retracted the cup and crouched across from me so that we were on eye level. "I found the Reddit posts, I said, when I was searching for university applications. I'm not going to tell Tyler, or anyone else for that matter, anything about what Kate wrote." "Wise, I doubt the fairies would be pleased with you for making them come erase Tyler's memory. I want to believe he's got a sense of humor, so I'm just assuming that was a joke." "I'm not sure what I want to do," I said glumly. "Mom wants me to stay here and marry my boyfriend." "You realize that you're seeking advice from a creature that literally cannot choose his own name, much less what he wants to be. You sought me out." He inclined his head slightly, and I thought it was conceding the point. But there was a faintly mocking smile on his lips as he did. "Perhaps he didn't seek me out. Perhaps I called him, just as Kate used to." "This wouldn't be a difficult decision if you'd already decided to stay," he said, rising to his feet. "Staying with what you know is always the easier choice. There is comfort in familiarity." "He hit me," I whispered. "My boyfriend. I haven't told anyone else yet." "Pain can be familiar." He turned to leave. I glanced up at him in surprise. "I still haven't decided if I want a drink or not," I said. "It wasn't a serious offer. You belong to something else tonight." Startled, I looked around me. There was nothing in eyeshot, but why was Bo backing away while keeping his gaze expectantly on me? Hadn't Kate handled all the dangerous things? I stumbled to my feet, heart pounding loud enough that I could hear it. Then, I realized it wasn't my heartbeat I was hearing. It was hooves. This was Christmas time. I turned around to stare at the source of the approaching noise in dismay, rooted in terror as a group of armored riders mounted on horseback came crashing through the woods, bearing down on where I stood, the Shulakun, here to drown someone that definitely wasn't feeling the Christmas spirit right now. I thought of the damn yearbook, how I got that title not because I was in any more danger than the rest of them, but because I'm incompetent. And I'm ashamed to say that I stood there, paralyzed by fear, helpless to do even the simplest of things. I didn't even try to run. The lead rider closed on me. He leaned over in his saddle, stretching out one hand. I flinched, and then the ground was spinning out from under me. I felt a moment of weightlessness, and it was like every muscle in my body froze. And then I landed on my stomach across the horse's back. It knocked the wind out of me, and it was like my chest froze up. I clutched uselessly at the horse's thin hair, panicking as the ground rushed past my face at a dizzying speed, carried along by the horse's hooves flashing at the corner of my vision. The shulukun had thrown me bodily across the front of his saddle, and Bo, that little shit, just waved goodbye at me as he quickly receded out of sight. "This one doesn't care much for Christmas," the lead rider hollered back at his company as they rode through the forest. "And what do we do with those that don't keep the spirit of the season?" "Drown them," the rest yelled in response. "But I'm on the campground," I wailed. "Tyler bought the lake," the rider replied smugly. "Signed the paperwork yesterday." "Well, I'm a little salty at Tyler for that." "I'm sorry," I sobbed. "There's a lot going on right now. Can't I get a second chance?" "Show us your devotion," one of the shulukun cried. "A song," another added. "A song." It took a moment to catch on to what they were demanding. I got good grades, but I don't feel like I'm particularly clever, and I'm certainly not very brave. But desperation can do funny things to a person, gives them resolve they didn't know they had. I cannot tell you how hard it is to sing Jingle Bells while slung across a horse, running at a full gallop while also sobbing uncontrollably. But I somehow got it out. And then the rider grabbed hold of my jacket once more and heaved me off. I landed head first in a snowdrift. I was stuck up to my waist and I kicked helplessly, thrashing in blind panic as the hoofbeats receded. Maybe they wouldn't drown me, but I'd suffocate if I didn't get out of the snow. The cold worked its way into my skin and the air grew stale in my lungs. I opened my mouth to gasp and found only snow, filling my mouth, and I desperately choked on it. The letter was still clutched tight in my frozen fingers. College, a way out. I convulsed, twisting my body together and digging my knees into the snow. The spastic, desperate motion broke off a chunk of the wet snow and sent it sliding down the snowbank. The rest of me broke free shortly after, and I slid down it to rest at the base, gasping for air. More snow broke free, gently rolling down to half cover my chest. But I didn't care. I'd survived. I was alive. The cold air was sweet as it burned in my lungs. I think being half buried in snow was what saved me. The shulukun weren't the only things out hunting that day. I felt it first as a feeling of dread in my chest, a squeezing sensation. The light was suddenly painful in my eyes, like the waning sunlight reflected all the more brightly off the snow and ice. It was sharp, like the light was crystallizing, stabbing into my flesh. My breath came out in a thick cloud, and my tears froze on my cheeks. Footsteps. Heavy, even footsteps. I turned my head to the side, not daring to move any more than that. A massive figure was slowly trudging through the woods, shoulders hunched and head bowed. Its matted fur was the color of the tree bark, and curving horns protruded from its deformed skull. It glittered with frost, silver dusted on the tips of its horns and the ends of its fur. Its hooves left deep imprints in the snow that crackled with ice as the snow melted and immediately refroze in its wake. I shifted, burrowing deeper into the snow. My leg dislodged more of the snowbank, and it tumbled down over me, enveloping my body and covering my face and head so that I could barely see through a thin layer of white powder. The footsteps paused. The snow creaked as it shifted. It turned and walked in my direction. I sucked in one last deep breath and held it. I didn't dare exhale. I didn't dare do anything that could possibly alert it to my presence, hidden beneath the snow. Paralyzed with fear, I watched as its hooves stomped closer. I could smell sulfur and the snow steamed at its feet. It stood over me, an immense foul presence that I could feel on my skin. Like insects were crawling down the back of my jacket, running across my spine. My lungs burned, thirsting for air, but I grimly held on. I embraced my terror, letting it paralyze my limbs. The creature stood there for a long, agonizing moment. Then, ponderously, it turned away. The smell of moss and rot went with it. A chain trailed behind it. It was clutched in one hand, taut against the weight it dragged behind it. I finally took a breath, shallow, shaking, as the rattle of the chain covered any noise I might make. I watched as the chain bounced past me until it ended, wrapped tight around the neck of the body it was dragging behind it. My boyfriend. His body was frozen solid, with his hands clutching at the chain wrapped around and around his neck. His eyes were open, bulging like glass marbles, and his tongue stuck out from between his frosted lips. His legs dragged behind him like a doll, leaving shallow furrows in the snow as he slid past me. Krampus had come to take all the wicked boys and girls away. I remained hidden under the snow as he continued on his slow journey through the forest, dragging my boyfriend behind him like a sled. I didn't work up the courage to move until long after he'd gone. Only once I was convinced I was entirely alone did I finally crawl out of the snow, shaking violently, and stumbled back through the woods to find a familiar path before the sun set entirely. Tyler found me at the edge of the forest. He saw my car in the parking lot and went searching for whoever was still on the campground. He's a nice person. His wife made me hot chocolate while I warmed up inside their house, shaking violently as my hands and feet thawed. Then he let me use his computer to fill out the university's acceptance form and register for my first semester of classes. I haven't told my family yet. In fact, I haven't told anyone in town. I might not tell anyone until the day I leave. I'm telling you though, because I feel like I can. I'm going to leave all this behind me. I'm not Kate. I'm not stuck here because of my family or any other obligation. I'm not going to die to something inhuman like my yearbook entry says. I'm going to college instead,